Today's topic is drug concentration and response. Dose is the amount of drug administered to the patient, and the effect it brings is referred as response. Dose-response relationship is important to predict the potency and efficiency of the drug. We would discuss about it in detail later in this session. The response of the drug depends upon the concentration of the drug at the site of action, that is, dose plasma concentration. This depends on the number of receptor-ligand interaction. The dose-response interaction is studied by plotting a graph of effect or response as a function of concentration, independent of time. Dose is plotted on the x-axis and the effect or response on the y-axis. The drug-receptor interaction obeys the law of mass action and follows a hyperbolic curve according to the equation E is equal to E max into concentration divided by the sum of EC50 and concentration. When the concentration is at very low, then it would be approximately a linear line. In such cases, effect is the product of slope and concentration. Now, as per the occupational receptor theory that we discussed in our earlier session, the action of a drug depends on the concentration of drug bound to the receptor. The pharmacodynamics principle is the drug D when binds to the receptor forms a complex Dr that gives a response. The response is proportional to the rate of drug-receptor complex formation, and the effect of that is based on the rate of association and dissociation of the drug to and from the receptor, depicted by K1 and K2 respectively. In such case, the effect that is caused by the drug is given by the formula E is equal to product of maximum effect and D concentration divided by the sum of Kd value, that is dissociation constant, and concentration of drug. Here, the Kd value is the drug concentration where the effect or receptor occupancy is half maximal. Based upon this, the earlier formula of Emax can be modified as B is equal to B max into C divided by C plus Kd. The drug-dose response relationship are of two types: graded dose response and Contal dose response. The graded dose response is the response curve plotted with gradual increase in the drug dose till the administered drug reaches a maximal response, as shown in the figure below. While the Contal dose relationship is constructed for drugs which have either response or no response. Example, the presence or absence of epileptic seizures indicate the given dose of the drug. It is performed on a population of subjects. We'll discuss about Contal dose-response relationship later. First, the graded dose response. For this, let us consider a hypothetical dose-response curve as represented below. Dose here is plotted on the x-axis and response on y-axis. The information that the dose-response curve gives is first the potency of the drug, that is the EC50 value, the concentration at which maximum response that can be attained, that is B as shown in the figure, and change in response per unit dose, that is the slope C as shown in the figure. The dose response data can be represented as a dose response curve, the first diagram A, or as drug effect against logarithm of concentration or dose, that is figure B. If the graph is plotted for dose response data, the curve is a hyperbolic one, while if the drug effect is plotted against logarithm of concentration or dose, it becomes a S-shaped or sigmoid curve. The figure here represents the relationship between drug concentration and drug effect. That is the EC50 value and the dissociation constant as discussed in our earlier slide. The drug dose response curve gives information about the potency, efficacy, slope, and variability of the drug. Another parameter that is to be known is the threshold dose. Threshold dose is the minimum dose or concentration of the drug required to bring a minimum detectable effect, as shown in the graph above. A dose below the threshold value or threshold dose would not bring about any response. Potency is the activity or response brought about by the drug at a given concentration. It is expressed as EC50 or ED50, which is the concentration of the drug required to produce half the maximum effect. Lesser the EC50 value, higher the potency of the drug. Efficacy. It is a measure of the maximum response a given drug produces. It is independent of the potency and affinity of a particular drug. Example, a competitive antagonist can have high affinity for the receptors, but its efficacy is zero. The graphs below show the drug dose response curve. The first graph is a comparison between two drugs, A and B. The x-axis represents concentration or dose and the y-axis represents the response. The EC50 or ED50 value of drug A is less than B. Therefore, drug A is more potent than drug B. But the concentration at which B gives maximum response is less than A. So, drug B has a greater maximum efficacy than A. Similarly, in graph 2, three drugs are compared. Now, a small assignment for you. The graph here shows the drug dose response curve for four drugs A, B, C, and D. Try to make comparisons between the four drugs for its potency and efficacy and make your conclusions. You can check your inferences. Hope you understood the difference between potency of a drug and efficacy of a drug. An example, three drugs, isoproterenol, epinephrine, and norepinephrine, are the drugs that affect the myocardial function. They increase the heart contractions. All the three drugs have the same efficacy. All the three drugs bind to the beta receptors in the heart and their affinity is of the order ISO is greater than E and NE. But the potency or the EC50 value of ISO is less than E and NE, making it more potent than the other two. Thus, the efficacy of a drug is independent of its potency and affinity to the receptors. Slope. The slope of the drug dose curve helps to predict the potency of the drug. It is the change in response per unit dose. Steeper the slope, higher the potency of the drug. The steepness is quantified by the hill slope, also known as the slope factor. The steeper curve would have higher slope factor. Next parameter is variability. It is the drug dose response curve plotted for the same drug in different individuals. Basically, reproducibility of the data in different individuals. It gives an idea of inter-individual differences in response for a drug at the same concentration. It could be acquired or inherited. This variability that is seen in different individuals could be due to variations in number of receptors, receptor functions, difference in post-receptor responses like secondary messenger systems, severity of disease, or due to pharmacokinetic parameters like absorption, clearance, etc. As discussed in our early slides, there are two types of drug dose response curves, the graded dose response curve and the Contal dose response curve. The Contal dose response curve is the dose response curve plotted for binary effect of the drug, that is, either the presence or absence of a response. Example, a particular drug when administered either stops the epileptic seizures or does not. There are only two possibilities. The Contal dose response curve is plotted for a population rather than for an individual administered with different doses of a particular drug. Thus, the Contal dose response curve gives a generalized effect of the drug in a population and can be utilized to estimate the safety information about the concerned drug. The figure here shows the Contal dose effect plots. The bell-shaped curve indicates the frequency distribution of the doses of drugs required to produce a specific effect. The Contal dose response curve can be utilized to calculate the medium effective dose, the medium toxic dose, medium lethal dose, and also the therapeutic dose. The medium effective dose or ED50 is something similar to the EC50 or ED50 of the graded dose response curve. The medium effective dose is the dose at which 50% of the individuals exhibit the specified response, as shown in the graph. Medium toxic dose or TD50 value is the dose required to produce a particular toxic effect in 50% of the individuals. Medium lethal dose or LD50 value is the dose that kills 50% of an exposed population, as shown in the graph. A dose around 150 would actually kill 50% of the exposed population. Therapeutic index or TI. It is the measure of drug safety and is calculated as a ratio of TD50 to ED50 or LD50 to ED50. Higher the TI value, safer the drug. The TI value greater than equal to 1 or 50% is said to be toxic. If the LD curve is flatter, it means the drug is safer. Applications of dose response curve. A dose response curve is required to decide the dose of a particular drug to bring about change or effect. Compare the dosage to percentage of people showing different effects. Compare a wide range of drugs for its different doses and brands, comparing the efficacy and potency of different drugs. Comparison between agonist and antagonist becomes easier by means of dose response curves. Thank you.